for me at least, it's the way that I identify, just in, not like besides race or anything like that, but like how I identify with myself and my body.
To me, gender identity is a lot of things, and a lot of the time it comes off for me, at least on how, like, I don't know if it's necessarily like how I look, but how I'm dressed and how I act. Most of the time, that's what's perceived with gender identity.
Well, okay, so like how I've been raised has been very, very binary. I didn't realize almost until I graduated college that sex and gender were different.
Yeah, so people just assume everyone's cisgender, so they talk about things as if sex and gender are the same thing. They'll use the terms like man and woman, and then they will assume someone based on their sex that that's what their gender is.
Well, personally, I identify as like non-binary or genderqueer. Also, part of my gender is I just identify very strongly with fairies, and I know some people are like, oh my god, that's weird, but like it is like part of my gender identity. And yeah, I think for that, it's just like any label or lack thereof that a person feels comfortable with.
Like your sex is made up of your hormones, your genitalia, and your chromosomes. And then gender is how you personally identify, and that has more to do with gender roles, gender expression, and then gender identity, which is the big one, which is how you feel and exactly like how you prefer to be identified. And then gender expression is how you choose to display that to the world.
At least for me, I grew up somewhere where no one really talked about anyone who wasn't a guy or a girl, like in their eyes. So it was like a lot of the time, it was reinforcing stereotypes. So if you were like, I don't know, if you were more feminine, you were just automatically like, you're classified as a girl, that you can't really step out of that boundary. So you're supposed to cook, and you're supposed to clean, and you're supposed to do a lot of the things that women traditionally have done through history. And it goes for the same thing as men, but it wasn't really a conversation. Nobody talked about gender, like how people perceive themselves or what gender identity is and could be.
I've been super lucky with my family. I mean, as a little kid, I got like Disney princess dresses, so I'd be like in a footy pajama with a princess dress over it playing with Legos. My family was really awesome, so there wasn't any like stereotypes pressed upon me in that sense, yeah.
In like school settings where they would be like girls on one side, boys on the others, and then they'd have like different expectations for like how you'd do based on that. Or like in sports, they'd be like girls versus boys, and then they'd kind of like they'd like always tell like the boys group like, oh, make sure not to be too rough, like go softer on them and stuff like that.
But my mother is insistent that we never wear jewelry, my brother and I. You know, I come from a family with only one sibling and both guys. We were never allowed to wear jewelry. I remember making a bracelet once, and my mother telling me I couldn't wear it, and then her, disciplining me when I snuck it on at a birthday party, and she caught it underneath my sleeve.
It's that like when I was driving, someone like cut me off, and they expected me to like they looked back and expected me to give them all kinds of faces, and I was just sitting there listening to jazz. I was perfectly fine. I was like, you can just go. You got more important things to do than I do, so it's fine.
My mother's paragon of manhood was Gaston from Beauty and the Beast. The ideal role model for me growing up, or was pushed upon me growing up, was a villain, which is really kind of bizarre. And I'm sure it happened, but I never remember kind of any conversation explicitly separating, Gaston's maleness and perceived ideal maleness from his actions in the Beauty and the Beast film. But I still think about that and laugh. Big, tall, hairy, strong, and resorting to violence.
As a specimen, yes, I'm intimidated.
When you say something like feminine or masculine, like it's all just kind of like ideas up in the air. Like, what does that really mean? What we know about being feminine is just stuff that like society's taught us, like pink dolls. Like a more masculine thing was like chopping wood, drinking beer, liking the color blue. Don't know about the first two, but trucks, burgers. Okay, those are all just objects. Those are all just things. You know, what does that have to do with who you intrinsically are as a person? Nothing. Like, why is wearing a dress connected with being a woman? It's just a piece of clothing.
I've known that I was non-binary since I was like a really little kid. I just never really fit in with boys or girls. And it didn't really pressure me to do or be certain things. It just sort of like made me feel like a little bit of an outcast, because like there are things that are like made for boys and made for girls, and while those like gender stereotypes can be like really oppressive and like hurtful, there's nothing that's like really made for me, and that can feel very othering.
Maybe a little bit because I identify as male and I do a bit of musical theater stuff, so I think the stereotype for that is you are very flamboyant and like over the top.
So like I started playing Frisbee, and then I went to this like intense sports training camp for 1 week over the summer, and it was like mostly boys who were there. And I was like, well, I mean, I never got past doing like all of that stuff, but to be fair, like I wasn't very good because it was my first year. There just was never an opportunity for me to learn anything, because as soon as you're not able to prove yourself, they just give up on you, and it's just like, okay, that's it. She can't play, so we're not even gonna help her learn. It was like ridiculous, and I just feel like if it was a boy like who was starting to learn how to play Frisbee, there would be so much more room for him to mess up and for him to fail and then learn and try again, and he wouldn't really be judged for it because it would just be like, oh, it's this new player. But when you're a girl in an environment like that, or someone who identifies as female in an environment like that, you just have to like constantly show that like, oh, I'm the cool girl who can like throw discs so far and lay out all the time, and like I'm like, you have to be a superstar. And I literally couldn't because I was learning. So yeah, that kind of discouraged me from going back.
This seems absurd because I have no control over how tall I am. But you know, I always had this compulsion to try and make myself feel taller or be taller or sort of project myself in a different way, even when it felt unnecessary. Because
I'm a woman who's very confident and like I hold a lot of power, and so people take that and they're very intimidated by me.
Like expectations. You can also move to the next question if you want.
How I've defied or followed rules or expectations.
Things like letting my boyfriend do my makeup and stuff like that. I don't go really actively out of my way to defy them, especially being a trans guy. It's like when you go out of your way, then you get misgendered. So there's kind of this aspect of having to fit into this role, otherwise like people just won't respect your pronouns.
I think, at one of the tournaments, and one of the players had said something to me because I had my breast cancer socks on, and asked me why I was wearing pink socks, and I was like, I guess I can just like really wear whatever color I want because they're just socks. I guess it's still like perceived that there are still like feminine colors and manly colors, and that there is like no intersection.
I choose and have chosen to dress very nicely in the past couple of years. You know, what I'm wearing now is actually really casual for how I dress. And to me, you know, that's kind of a statement against this idea that, you know, hetero men should dress like slobs. You know, because there is this perception that, you know, gay men dress really nice, hetero men can just do whatever they want.
I I kind of had a complicated relationship with like what I was wearing and how feminine I would be when I was younger. Like I would remember if I had to wear, like my mom wanted me to wear like a pretty dress or something, I would dress more feminine, quote unquote feminine, whatever that means. But I would always feel really self-conscious. Like I would think that it would draw attention to myself and I would be like nervous. Like I remember one time I had this like, she bought me this like, my mom's ridiculous, like this cheetah print like fur coat and was like so happy about it. And I wasn't that into it. Like I liked it and I was like, sure, like glamorous, like superstar mode, like sure, could wear this cheetah print coat. But I was also like in 2nd grade. But I felt like I was very self-conscious.
I think, okay, so I was working at this fast food restaurant, and I've worked at a few of them, but this one particularly, there was this manager who he was decreasing wages for women and in where we were, and they were for the wrong reasons. It wasn't like they weren't showing up for their shifts or anything, but it was because of the way that they worked, and people would request more hours, but it was often like the women were taken back from their hours and the men were always given more hours, so they were given more opportunities to benefit from it. And which is one of the reasons why I quit, is I stood up to him and was like, hey, like this is all wrong. And I was able to speak up, but I know a lot of people didn't feel comfortable about that. And it came into play because of his culture and like how he was raised, and so what his beliefs were different from what my beliefs are about gender identity. And I think that was a moment in time for me where, because I was able to speak up against him, that he kind of was taken back and like, I don't know how to describe that, but it was a really good moment because I was able to say what I wanted to and wasn't like held back because I'm a girl.
100%. Growing up, I personally was very masculine, which makes sense considering I'm masculine. But things like just the way words and things people did, the way they like felt when they hit me, was something that started to make me realize like, oh, this is not for me.
No. My mom, from like a very young age, was like, if you're gay, I will love you. If you're anything else, I will love you. And like, it didn't really matter to them what I was. It was like, they're very open and accepting. So like from a very young age, I learned that growing up.
I don't think so. I've always felt and like I identified as a male. Yeah, and so I don't think so, no.
And it sounds dark, but you know, sometimes you question that and be like, okay, like what's the causality here? You know, if I like to dress nice, does this say something about my gender identity, or am I doing this in spite of it, or not in spite of it, in spite of society? And it's something I would just say that I think everyone does. You know, you look at outside pressures and you ask questions of yourself.
I don't know what I'm saying.
That was a quickie thing. Yeah.
So, question answered.